Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
We turn our attention next to the other end of the generation scale, to the youngest people in the country. Well, not the youngest, but to the youngest people in the workforce who were on the streets yesterday, students protesting against an assault upon their maintenance grants. I didn't realise they were being removed, and it paints an ugly picture of Britain. It paints an ugly picture of Britain because the choice between going to university and not going to university will now, for anyone under 25, become the choice between taking potentially appallingly paid work or getting some qualifications and coming out with an appalling level of debt. I love the way the media works sometimes. I don't know whether this will confirm all your worst suspicions, but there was an excellent article in The Independent yesterday written by a chap called Chris Hemmings about precisely how the younger generation has been caught in a terrible pincer movement, because they're exempt from Osborne's so-called living wage, you know. £6.70 an hour will still be the national minimum wage for people aged 21 to 24 come next April. And then, by an amazing quirk of media fate, Chris Hemmings, who wrote this article in The Independent Voices, is producing this radio programme today. So if you think I'm arrogant, imagine saying, oh, there's a great article you should read before you present this programme today. Here it is. And I think, well, that's a quality bit of producing there. And I noticed the byline. You can't give me articles you've written yourself. That's a wonderful way. But of course, if they're as good as this, then you can. And here's the problem, right? Here is, in a nutshell, the problem. I didn't realise they were taking away maintenance grants, and the reason I didn't realise is it's not a very sexy story. And the reason it's not a very sexy story is that it doesn't affect many people. And the reason it doesn't affect many people is that it affects really only the children of families with a combined income of less than £25,000 who can currently rely upon a relatively small grant from the government to just make sure they can, keep themselves in books and shoes. And while taking out huge debts in order to be at university, it just ensures that they're not actually pushed over the edge into thinking, well, it's not worth going at all. The debts are unmanageable. So we will be addressing the question of whether or not free university education should be returned to the political agenda in Britain. But whenever these issues come up, I always tell you about one of my first experiences in the workplace, because these are the experiences that form us all, aren't they? One of my first experiences in the workplace, when I was working in menswear in central London, and I used to get into some terrible set twos with a permanent member of staff, because there was quite a lot of commission on the table, and he would effectively steamroller us kids for our commission. So if you had, at the time, it was the Japanese customers who would sometimes be dropping £5 or £6 grand on cashmere coats and cashmere blazers, and you'd spend 20 minutes helping them try it on, and then this fellow would sort of steam in on your way to the till and nick the customer off you so that he could run all the transactions through the till and claim the commission for himself. And there were quite significant sums of money. I sold a Vicuna overcoat to Ronnie Wood out of the Rolling Stones once, that was worth about £13,000. We were on about 0.5%, and this was 20 years ago. So you can see the commission was not to be sniffed at. And he used to get the terrible hump with us about this when we started standing up to him and saying, look, that's our commission, we need the money. And he'd get his payslip out every month and show it to me. He'd show me the box on his payslip where he'd made his national insurance and income tax contributions. And he would say, I never went to university. And I was in the very first year, I think, of student loans, but you still got grants, you still got emergency funds, actually. And he would point at this box on his payslip and he would say to me, why should I be paying for you to go to university when I never had the chance myself? And it was one of those little political moments for me where a perhaps somewhat lazily held political opinion that everybody deserves free university education got challenged. And that was the lever with which I sort of took the lid off my support for free university education on the grounds that I could afford it. Why did he have to pay for me to have it? You see? Now, as I look at what's happening most recently in this country, I find myself wondering whether we've actually allowed the pendulum to swing far too far. If you've got a combined household income of less than £25,000, shouldn't you be entitled to some form of financial support to go to university? Shouldn't the government be actually saying to you, well, this is the ladder of life. This is what will transform your future. This is possibly your only chance to break out of the social class that you were born into. What's it like to be young in Britain at the moment? We're going to see more marchers later today. They'll be marching about something a little more perhaps nebulous than tuition fees, the very notion of capitalism itself being a busted flush. One hopes there isn't violence. One knows that if there is violence, the cameras and the journalists will focus upon that, even if it's not remotely representative of the bigger picture. That is sadly the way the cookie crumbles these days. But if I tell you that there was a report, I think it was published last week, that found poverty was now having a much, much bigger impact on the education of Brits than ever before. In fact, it has a bigger impact on the education of white Britons, even more than it does for other ethnic groups. The reason for that, very, very sadly, is that other ethnic groups might be going home to environments that encourage education and intellectual pursuits. Even though they're very poor families, the ethnicity divide generally finds education at home, attitude at home. So it's the white British working class kids who are getting let down at school and not catching up with kids from other backgrounds because their mums and dads aren't helping them. Of course, those mums and dads will, by various politicians, be encouraged to blame the ethnic minorities for the fact that their own children aren't getting a proper education, because to blame themselves would be unthinkable. It just means that if you look at the combination of economic situation and future prospects, to be student age now is probably a less appealing prospect than at any other point since universities. In fact, even before Tony Blair got in, you'd still get a maintenance grant to go to university, So actually, for a kid from a humble background, it was probably easier to go to university then than it is now. 13 minutes after 11. I toyed with what question to ask you on this, because I'm always a little wary of confining the conversation to certain groups, to certain age groups. But then it occurred to me that I could be talking about your children or your grandchildren. I'm not necessarily just talking about you. In your 20s, your early 20s, your late teens. What I want to know is twofold. Do you feel completely abandoned? Do you actually feel, when you learn that now the average income of a pensioner last month exceeded the average income of someone in work? Did you know that? At the national, these aren't the things that get shouted from the rooftops. The average weekly income of a retired pensioner now exceeds because of investments and various protections and free TV licenses and bus passes, now exceeds the average income of a working adult in Britain. And that's astonishing. I have a sense that people aged between about 16 and 25 have been thrown on the bonfire by this government. That they are the sacrifice that David Cameron is prepared to make to shore up the financial situation of people a lot more likely to vote for him. But I know that makes me sound a little lazy and a little bit undergraduate. I will try to back it up with facts, but I'd much rather back it up with you. If you want to phone in, the number remains 0345 6060 973. I've picked up on calls in since Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party. The people who tell me most passionately that they support Jeremy Corbyn often, I don't know why I've got the age 23 stuck in my head. They often seem to be telling me that they're 23 years old, 24 years old. People who feel that something as potentially radical as a Jeremy Corbyn-led government is not only desirable but plausible seem to be a lot more prevalent among the younger generation than they are among mine. And I'm just wondering whether this is partly why. So two stories. Young people face the worst economic prospects for several generations, and their lives have got worse over the past 5 years. This isn't a report by The Guardian, it's the Equality and Human Rights Commission, okay? This defines people under 34 as suffering the biggest slide in income and employment that we've seen in decades. And they also, to compound the problem, face higher barriers to achieving economic independence and success than they did 5 years ago. Right? That is a finding. You can challenge it, but it's fairly well supported. So you've got a tougher time of it if you're under 34 than anybody else from that generation has had for decades. And then they're taking away the rights of young people from homes with an income of less than £25,000 to get some financial help going to university. I'm just trying to knit them together, a bit clumsily at the moment, But I think the question I'm asking you, whether it's you or your son or your grandson that I'm talking about, I'm just wondering whether or not... Well, actually, I'm not. I'm wondering what it's like to be caught up in this economic situation. What's it like to be young, is what I'm asking you. 0345 6060 973. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. They get glossed over, these, because all the stories that are populist and popular in the British media at the moment all hinge upon the same fulcrum. I only realised this morning when we were discussing what to do on today's show. Almost every topic you hear on LBC will in some way boil down to, do you have any sympathy, empathy or support for these people here? Not every single one, but almost every topic these days. Do you have any sympathy, empathy or support for these people here? Who are these people? Oh, they're Syrians today. They're unemployed tomorrow. They're the low paid the next day. They're the poor the day after that. Do you have any sympathy at all for these people? And we are turning in, I hope I'm wrong about this, but it's my pet theory at the moment, we're turning into a nation that is actively and violently discouraged from having any sympathy or empathy for anyone. Yesterday it was the doctors. Do you have any sympathy or empathy for the junior doctors? I have epic empathy and sympathy for these young people, but I never hear their voice. Today I'd like to. If you're just tuning in and you're thinking, well, who is this middle-aged oaf asking what it's like to be young? I do have good reason for these inquiries, and by young I mean under 35. The contention is that a combination of the student legislation that was protested yesterday. Most powerful line in all of that, I think it's probably this, from an LSE student. Some anarchists came and caused the trouble. They were all dressed in black. They were not part of the main protest. They were fighting with the police and then ran away. What's the coverage in the newspapers today? Yeah, some people dressed in black fighting with the police. What was the protest about? What the students complained? I don't know. I'm just looking at pictures of dressed in black fighting with the police. Sad. That's why I'm asking, because when you combine that with the Equality and Human Rights Commission report last week that young people under 34 suffered the biggest slide in income and employment for decades and now face bigger barriers to achieving economic independence than ever before, including just 5 years ago when we were supposedly coming out of an economic crisis, I want to know whether you recognise that description and indeed what it's like to be in the middle of this pincer movement. Ibs is in Hackney. Ibs, you can kick us off this hour. What would you like to say?
Hi there.
Hello,
so I'm actually a post-A-level student. So I've just finished my A-levels at B6 College, and I'm now working there as an A-level tutor. For me, I had to take a gap year, not necessarily because of the decrease of grants, but mainly because of the fact that I wasn't allowed to do my subject choice. But the fact that the maintenance grants has been abolished, I think there's two different impacts here. One impact is that now, as coming from a working class family myself, I've I've missed out on £12,000 of financial aid that personally I think that working class students deserve.
Over 3 years. How many years is that over?
So that's over 3 years minimum. If
Yes.
I'm doing a year abroad, or if I wanted to extend my course, then that's.
I've got it nearer 10,000. I'm not being pedantic, but just £3,387 a year I've got. Is there some sort of London waiting on that?
Actually, the maintenance grants, what I was going to be awarded last year was 4,500.
Okay.
If you times that by 3, it's actually bigger than 10 grand. And even if I were again to extend my year to do a year abroad, or just to do a gap year, or a year in placement, then that's more money that's been abolished. And I think it's sad because not only does it make working class students actually not want to go to university, but now it's affecting them on a completely different level. We're now disadvantaged at a much more scale. Personally, I think we definitely deserve this money because as a student myself, I worked really hard. I was predicted DDD, but I got 2 A stars and an A. And it's that hard work, and it was that motivation for me to...
Okay, here's the thing, though. I'm glad you were listening. I wish you well. Could you do me one small favour?
Of course.
Can you remember the second T in tutor next time you're in front of your A-level students?
The second
T. Don't call yourself an A-level tutor. That's just me being pedantic, Ibs. You promise me that?
Okay.
Promise me?
Okay, but I am an A-level tutor.
There you go, tutor. That was all. I was picking you up on the way you pronounce it. I just don't like the idea of you standing in front of a class full of A-level students describing yourself as a tutor without a second T in the word. But that's possibly me being a little bit... Tutor. Yes?
I've been saying that, yeah.
Right, good man. Okay, the second thing is this. Here is a fella, right, imaginary, in the studio, sitting with me, bloke I used to work with in menswear. He is on, let's say he's on an average income, national average, 25 grand. He looks at the tax coming out of his payslip every month, doesn't understand why any of his taxes should be helping you go to university and hopefully pursue a career much better paid than his. Why should he be paying for you to go to college?
I think at the end of the day, we are living in a dependency culture, right? An aging population. There's going to be more older generations than there are younger people. Older people, such as him himself, are actually going to be relying on my generation. It's our generation that not only has influenced so many different new technologies that we have now, but imagine what we're going to do and what we're going to actually create. There's going to be so much more different topics, so much more different ideologies that we're going to inspire. There's going to be so much different passionate students out there that are going to do a lot of. We're going to change.
Well, that would okay. So if you were a medical student, that's fine. If you were arguably even perhaps a journalism student, that would be fine. If you're going into public sector or vocational work, that would all be fine. But what if you're sort of going to go into advertising or marketing or banking? Why the hell should I be paying for you to go to college?
But then I think that depends on how you value your degree. I mean, I personally think that every degree is valuable, and I think every degree has a chance of you getting to a good job. And then that itself, I think it depends what the actual individual student wants to do. So, for example, I would be a psychology student, and I would want to inspire students and change their mindsets and hopefully get them to challenge labels that they face and, just be better individuals and help them psychologically and help them for the better.
Oh, you sound like a lovely bloke, and you sound like potentially a great psychologist and tutor. But the final question I'd like to ask you is whether or not the fact that you won't now get that £12,000 will prevent you or in any way dissuade you from taking up your place at university.
Okay, so so it won't.
Quick answer. I've got loads of people waiting.
It won't affect. No, it won't affect me, but I think it will affect a lot of other students.
No, fair enough. No, that's it. No, that's it. That's all I need. I mean, I'm glad you're cracking on. But I completely understand why you fear that other students perhaps will not be similarly minded. 26 minutes after 11. What's it like to be young? David's in Bermondsey. David, what have you got?
Hi there. So I'm not 24, but I am a Corbyn supporter, so there are more out there.
How old are you?
I'm 32.
Right, you're in this category. You're in this group. What's it like?
I am. It's been pretty hard. I kind of just got out of university just as the crash was happening, and it was, nightmare to get any work. Ever since then, it has been hard, but it's the housing that it keeps coming back to, unfortunately. I know it's a bit of an old record that keeps going round, but half my wage goes on somewhere to live.
Yes.
And every time in London I find a nice place, settle down, prices go up, I have to move.
How often are you moving, roughly, at the moment?
Probably every 3 years at the moment. I used to live in Lewisham, then I moved over to kind of Southwark area, built the Shard, can't afford there. Move over into Bermondsey, all the creatives are moving in, I can't afford that.
Creatives, hipsters, I think they're called, aren't they?
There's a lot of beards and fixie bums.
It doesn't mean they've got money. They might be sleeping 3 to a room, these hipsters. They're living on breakfast cereal, aren't they?
But the thing is, it is the housing cost in London. I can't afford to put any money aside, so I can never really get on the housing ladder, and without that security, it's hard to put down roots and develop where you're going to live.
Of course, and everyone will recognise that. I suppose the question is whether or not you feel this is the message of austerity is necessary evil. I suppose this is it's got to be done. We've got to get our economy back on an even keel, which of course you probably know, as most people who listen to this programme, well, not all people maybe realise, translates as well. We need to take money away from people who haven't got much so that we can cut the taxes of people who've got plenty. Where do you feel the motivation is coming from politically to put people in the position that you find yourself in? Or is it just bad luck?
Well, I think they're obviously making choices. The debt was not caused by the people who are getting hit by it. Why don't we actually do a windfall tax on the banks to actually pay for some of these things instead of...
Politics of envy, that, isn't it, you see?
Well, they've got the most money. Shouldn't they be paying the most tax?
Politics of envy, that.
Well, it is, but...
Let's pretend that you're quite well off for a minute, and then you say the same thing. And then I say champagne socialism, that. And then you're not well off again, and you say it, and I say politics of envy, that. And then you have got a few quid in the bank, and you say, why don't we take more money off the banks or the richest people in the country? That's champagne socialism, that is. You can't win, mate.
Well, I would hope if I ever get to that point, I would have a bit more heart than some of them.
You would, but you'd be a champagne socialist if you've got heart. That's what you are. You look at the system, you're benefiting from it, you think it's unfair because of people like you, you're a champagne socialist. You look at the system, you're not benefiting from it, you think it's unfair because you're suffering. It's the politics of envy. Same sort of people who say that we've got to help our own people first before we help Syrians, and then say, when they look at the reports from Save the Children on how much poverty there is in this country, that there isn't any poverty in this country. So we've got to help our own people first on Monday, but on Tuesday Tuesday, there isn't anyone that needs our help. Zippity-doo-dah. On Wednesday, all the old people are going to die. On Thursday, if you've got a mobile phone, you can't possibly be poor. It's just fantastic. This encouragement to feel empathy, sympathy, humanity towards nobody at all, whether it's a junior doctor or a kid drowning in the Aegean Sea, well, that's Britain. I like that. Ibs's contribution, absolutely fascinating. You seem to find the most interesting element of it was me picking him up on his pronunciation. Trust me, if he wants to be a psychologist and he walks into a Viva or an interview at university and pronounces the word tutor with only one T in it, he will not go as far as he could have done if he pronounced it correctly. Public service broadcasting at its finest. 26 minutes to 12. Peter's in Holborn. What do you reckon it's like to be young these days, Peter, and what are you going to do about it?
Good morning, James. Well, 73 and with my bus pass and modest pension, I feel I'm very well off. I do try to hold up various younger friends and acquaintances of mine because they're in, difficulties of various kinds to do with housing and other things. And when it comes to meanness, I'd like to point out that I support 6 charities at the same time.
Yes.
And I would like to suggest a graduate tax because this has a far bigger cohort than just the students alone, and to raise more money so as to not cut such things as the maintenance grants, so you could go to such things as a graduate tax.
Yes.
I mean, when I was young, I came into London almost the first day. The first day I was serious looking, I had a modest bed sit, and within a week I had a job. You could go in and out of jobs in the 60s without too much trouble. I mean, now it looks like hell on earth to me, and the agencies one of my friends works for, just give them such a hard time. It seems almost
Is it as simple as pointing out that your generation is considerably more likely to vote than the generation we're discussing now, and therefore this government in particular has decided to almost cut adrift the under 35s and shore up the financial situation of the over 65s, maybe even the over 55s, in pursuit of future election victories? The simple statistic, and I've been picked up on this, and the fact that the average income of someone who's retired has overtaken the average income of someone who's in work, and I used bus passes and TV licences as part of that, and you're quite right, I was wrong to. It's actually in cash income terms, before you even count the bus passes and the TV licences, it's been overtaken. Is it just the sort of ebb and flow of economics, Peter, or do you see a political agenda here?
Absolutely. It's a very good point about voting. I always say this to my younger friends. I say, listen, I go down and vote. I vote every time. Well, I was brought up in a political family. But anyway, this is a general tendency, and the young people, whether they think this vote is useless or not, politicians will take more notice of their interests if they go down at that election, all elections, and vote.
And you couple that with the mood that's abroad in the country at the moment, that you're not supposed, you're not allowed, you're being actively encouraged not to feel empathy or sympathy for anybody else. Don't feel don't feel sorry, don't feel sympathy, don't feel supportive to anybody else. And then you have a section of society that is genuinely getting shafted. It's a sort of perfect storm politically, because no one's going to stick up for them and they will be ignored themselves.
Well, there's a wonderful poem about, I ignored them when they came for the Jews.
It's the patron saint of this programme, that poem, I think.
Loud,
that's right.
Nobody will come to help me.
Well, I worry that we overuse that Martin Niemöller reference. History doesn't actually record what the original version of it was, but it's a philosophical point that I find utterly irresistible, especially now when you. Also the ugliest thing that's gone on in recent years is the attempt to pretend you do care about some people as a way of justifying not doing anything to help others. That this whole line about we've got to help our own first. I chat to a gentleman unlucky enough to be homeless in Covent Garden most mornings, and I asked him if he'd been receiving any new support from people who decided to help him because we weren't helping the Syrians, and amazingly he hasn't had any increase in his care or input at all from all these people who say they're going to help our own instead of helping Syrians. Don't help anyone, stuff them all, especially the young. Welcome to Britain. Joe's in Richmond. Joe, what would you like to say?
Hi there. I just wanted to say what it's like from my side of the coin, James.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm classed as young or not. I'm 29.
Well, you're young. You're young for this conversation. Yes.
Young for this conversation.
Yeah.
Now, I'm self-employed tradesman, and we pretty much live off my money most of the time. Me and my wife.
Yeah.
it's pretty hard to find work continuously. Like, you might find work some weeks, you might not find it another week, so it's hard to get a consistent income.
But you count as employed, of course, even in the weeks when you're not finding work. 0-hour contracts have created this, and the fact that we don't have a proper minimum wage or union representation means that your employers can do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah.
But don't forget to blame immigrants. Don't forget to blame immigrants. It's got nothing to do with unions or minimum wage or any of that. It's all the immigrants' fault.
Yeah, totally. But I mean, what brings me to my wife's situation is even worse. My wife's a level 3 qualified hairdresser, and unfortunately, that's basically the worst job a woman could choose to have if you want to work for way under minimum wage. She only gets paid a percentage of what the work that she does, and unfortunately, she doesn't work in a very busy salon, and she has to work 6 days a week, 11.5 hours a day. Last month, she took home £300.
See, this is the thing people are ignoring. That she is on the statistics as being employed, and she's earning less than the minimum wage.
Yeah, and she works so hard. And some days they might book somebody in at 7:30 at night, which means she might have to stay till 9-10 o'clock at night to do that hair, and they pay her very, very little. And as far as I'm aware, as well, am I right in saying that apparently by the time I'm older, there will be no state pension?
Well, there will still be a pension, but you're going to have to be older to qualify for it. What light can you see at the end of the tunnel? I mean, it's odd for a 29-year-old man to be worrying about the pension, isn't it?
Well, that's what I keep thinking myself, well, we can't even cover the rent. I mean, we're facing eviction because, unfortunately, I can pay the rent some months, and some months I can't because we're barely getting enough to eat and keep gas and electricity going. So we're facing eviction, so we're soon to become homeless eventually unless I can get a windfall and some work and stuff coming in. But the future doesn't look very great because we can't put any money aside to save or for a pension. My wife doesn't really even earn enough to actually get to work and feed herself whilst being at work, so that basically comes out of my pocket. We're never at home. Even when I'm not working, I'm constantly trying to get work. But unfortunately, in my area, everybody's a self-employed tradesman, so you've got so much competition, and there's not really any employment jobs going, so your only chance is to cut a path for yourself, and I'm desperately trying to do it. I've got my website up, I am getting...
What sort of work do you do, Joe?
Work. I'm a decorator.
What's your website?
Am I allowed to say?
Yeah, of course you are, mate. Have a free advert on me.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
newimagedecorators.co.uk.
All one word, newimagedecorators.co.uk. You're based in West London, are you?
Well, yeah, no, it's a bit of a lie. I'm actually in Surrey.
That's all right. No, Richmond is in Surrey. My fault. So newimagedecorators.co.uk. You've heard Joe's story. Sounds like a stand-up guy to me. If you need some painting doing.
And just by people visiting that website would actually kind of bolster me a little bit higher up on Google, which you'd be doing me a great favour. So.
We just did it. We just did it, Joe.
Thank you.
No, thank you. It's 11:41. You see, it's not that hard. Bit supportive, bit of sympathy, bit of empathy, bit of human decency. Or, of course, you could just say, I blame the immigrants. Chris is in Luton. Chris, what would you like to say?
I'd just like to complain, James, that you're stopping me listening to my beloved BBC Six music. I know
They're doing all right. They're doing all right, Chris. They're doing all right.
Honestly, fantastic show. Basically, I'm 58. I love Jeremy Corbyn. He's made me rejoin the Labour Party.
Really?
I have kids of 100%, man, 100%. The guy, he's talking about issues. I mean, whether they're going to be able to manage the global, economy and et cetera, well, I don't know if it remains to be seen or not. But, I've got young children
right.
or in that age range, and so many of their friends are not signing on. They're not in the system at all. And, I mean, I hear what you say about young, educated 24-year-olds who are on the streets or supporting Corbyn or whatever. But these youngsters, they're totally apolitical. They don't see that there's anything, it's all they've ever known.
It's Ian Duncan Smith's dreams coming true, isn't it, that statement there? It's all they've ever known. They don't realise there's an alternative. Just suck it up. And by, of course, not signing on, they stay off the system. They don't get registered as unemployed. It's absolutely unbelievable. And my phones are ringing off the hook. I've got to tell you, these are not isolated incidents.
Well, this is it, and your last caller before last one about accommodation. I mean, the pressure on families, with these youngsters at home, not bringing any money home. I mean, a lot of them I know resort to sort of selling a bit of weed or doing this or doing that or doing the other. And it's just anarchy, and not in a good way. They just don't see that anything makes any difference.
Why not? What happens when you try and explain to them that it can, that it does? I mean, you're still engaged. You've rejoined the party because Corbyn's in charge. You can see some sort of possible light at the end of the tunnel. Why can't you communicate that to your children's friends or your children?
Well, I do. I mean, I run a pub, and the arguments I get in is unbelievable, because people, they're so cynical. I think a lot of working class people grow up with the idea that you don't talk about politics. That's what I get told all the time in my own pub. They can spout right-wing, racist nonsense.
Yes.
And when I say, hang on a minute here, I'm told that I'm too political to run a pub.
No, well, the one thing you're not allowed to do to the right-wing, racist nonsense spouters is hold up a mirror, Chris. That's the one thing they'll never forgive you for, because they think they're making sense. You hold up a mirror and they see an ugly, ranting, racist idiot, and they will never forgive you for that. If you don't believe me, have a look at my inbox. Refik's in Enfield. Refik, what would you like to say?
Basically, I'm 29, and I work as a pest control technician. And I speak to my colleagues who do the same job as me. And when I spoke to them, and I said to them, well, what was your wage then? And they turn around to me and go, well, we used to get about 24,000. Now, 20 years after, when things have gone up, bus prices from 40p when I used to go have gone up by I don't know how much now, £2.50. Train fares have gone up by God knows how much. House prices in London have gone by a stupid amount of percentages. And then when you start as a pest control technician, you start as 16. And when you qualified, do you know how much you start off with?
Go on.
18.
Yeah, and that happens in my profession as well. I wouldn't go into journalism if I was 22 today. I just wouldn't. I mean, the money I got for a 3-day-a-week contract on the Daily Express as a gossip columnist is more than some people I know on newspapers now on full-time jobs. It's not confined to any particular professions. People often say, well, you live in a middle-class bubble, you wait till they start coming for your jobs. I promise you, everyone is being treated like this. The only people who are getting better off are the people who started off with loads. And yet we're still sitting here swallowing it. And we'll still tomorrow hear and see and read people describing the protests against the economic situation that will unfold in this city later today as anarchists and ne'er-do-wells and the great unwashed. Oh, it's real. What are they wearing? They're wearing balaclava helmets. Let's talk about that. Let's not talk about the actual plight of people like Refik and all my other callers this hour. No, let's just talk about what was written on their placards and whether or not they should have been setting off their little gas canisters. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we're just looking at the reality of people's economic situation, chiefly young people, as they took to the streets yesterday to protest against those coming from households with a household income of £25,000 or less. They're having £3,387 a year worth of maintenance grants taken away, so the likelihood of kids from poorer backgrounds going to university disappears ever further over the horizon. And then you combine that with a report by the Equality Commission into the economic situation of people under 35. Answer is, it's the worst it's been since the Second World War. Biggest slide in income and employment. Higher barriers to achieving economic independence and success than 5 years ago. And I'll tell you now, and I'll tell you straight, they've pulled this off partly because of the anti-immigration rhetoric that's become so popular. Because who are you going to blame? Blame the immigrants while you're having your pocket picked by the government. Blame the immigrants while you're having your pocket picked by a banker. Blame the immigrants while you're having your pocket picked by a hedge fund manager. Blame the immigrants, blame the immigrants, blame the immigrants while you're having your pocket picked by a journalist who's telling you to blame the immigrants. Otherwise it wouldn't have happened. Otherwise it could not have happened. Unless you were being distracted, unless they were pointing in the wrong direction, unless Uncle Nigel was telling you to look over there and blame the Romanians or the people who are foreign, apart from his own wife, of course, or the people who don't have English as their first language, apart from his own children, of course. You blame them, and you won't notice that they're emptying your house. Jason's in Herne Hill. Jason, what made you pick up the phone?
A friend of mine, hi James. A friend of mine called me up and said, you've got to listen to this show. I live in Herne Hill in a block, 1930s block, where there's like 96 flats. Yeah. 60% of them are owned by a company, and they're basically shafting us with evictions, a systematic lot of evictions and rent hikes that are like £200 a month every year. I've been living here, so I'm 53, I've been living here for 17 years, and my wife's been living here 21 years. My two children, 16, two girls, 16 and 13, were born in the flat. In 2007, the community and the residents committee and the landlord all said, hey, maybe you're a gardener, because I'm a gardener. I was a landscape gardener then, but I'm more of a maintenance gardener now. Yeah. Would you like to come and look after the beautiful gardens where you live? I, of course, jumped at the chance because it's on my doorstep.
Yes, of course.
It's right outside. So I've been doing that since 2007. My wife, who's been living here longer, had her name on the tenancy agreement. She lost the tenancy agreement. We didn't know what sort of a tenancy agreement we had. A couple of years ago, when we quibbled over a rent hike, she then it was this year that they actually said to us, "We'd like you to leave." Now,
where are you going to go?
I'll get to that.
Yeah.
Basically, we've got nowhere to go. Well, we have got somewhere to go now because a lot of people have helped us.
Yeah.
We've had a petition, we've had a crowdfunder to pay off the 7,400 court costs that the landlord solicitors slammed on us when we had to defend ourselves in court because we couldn't get legal aid.
And you have to pay those costs now, even if you win, of course. Quite often.
That we can't win. There's no right to appeal. We missed the appeal date. We can't appeal. We didn't have a pro bono barrister or anybody on our case to advise us. So we took them on, and basically there were 2 points. We didn't have a copy of our original tenancy agreement. We asked for it in 2013. They didn't provide it, and basically a couple of weeks before the court, they sent us all the court papers with a copy of our original tenancy agreement in the court papers, which we'd been asking for since 2013. So basically, they ambushed us just before court, just because they knew that we wouldn't be able to sort out a defence and they could have got us out. They could get us out immediately.
I want you to understand the nature of the conversation we're having and where we're having it, because the question I'm going to ask you may seem a little callous, and I promise you it isn't, but I'm conscious of many factors, including the clock.
Yeah.
The conversation we've been having, the reason your friend told you to ring in, where does your experience play into the conversation we've been having?
Well, I've only just tuned into the conversation, James. So
no, of course, but it's a question of economic difficulties that you're facing, and I'm hearing that. But it sounds to me like you're being shafted by one particular company. I'm only getting your account of that.
He's one of the 150 richest people in the UK. He's a director of over 50 different companies.
Okay, and he's not here to defend himself, so I don't want you to identify him. So that's why your friend told you to ring in, because you are suffering at the hands of precisely the sort of processes we've been talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What? I mean, you've relied upon friends and neighbours and the community at large then to get you out of this hole.
Crowdfunder. We had an online crowdfunder that got over 3,500. Didn't quite reach its target. Basically, in order to move, because we're on such low incomes ourselves, we're just over 30 grand combined income with 2 teenage girls who need their own bedroom, and we're in a 2-bedroom place in Herne Hill. It's lovely. It's a 1930s building which is dilapidated and has been neglected by.
They're seeing it. You're an orange that hasn't been squeezed dry yet, aren't you?
Well, I'm feeling the squeeze, James.
No, I know, but from the point of view of the landlord who can get a few more quid out of you or out of that flat, it's an orange that hasn't been squeezed dry yet.
We are paying a modest rent of $1,000 a month. And
peanuts, isn't it?
I realise that's a modest rent. And he wants to charge the next person $1,650. Now, I've worked here since 2007, as I said. 2008, I got a pay rise. Didn't quite cover the. I worked quite hard. Didn't quite cover the rent, but it was a pay rise, and they gave me it. Recently, just before court, I said, "Well, can I have that rate? Can I have that pay rise now?" Actually, before this whole thing started, I asked them. I said, "Do you think I could have the pay rise because it hasn't gone up since 2008, but our rent's gone up by 360 since then?" Could I have a pay rise?
Yeah.
And the management company said, "Oh, I'll have a word with the landlord's guys and see if we can negotiate." It seems like a joined up thinking. We might be able to manage that for you. And all I got back was, "Sorry, mate, it's a no." He's just not. He's not going to agree to it. He's like a.
Mate, there's a lot here, clearly, and I'm delighted you've had a chance to sort of put your story on air. If you want to send me an email with more details, if there's anything we can look into, then james@lbc.co.uk is the address that you will need. But remember, of course, the narrative that you've heard for the last 6 or 7 years is people like Jason have only got themselves to blame for their situation. They could get another job or work harder, or of course, if it's proved that you can't get another job or work harder, then you blame the immigrants, or of course, if it's not the immigrants, then where's that? Billy's pointed out, and you're quite right, Billy, I should issue an apology here. I am being very unfair. We have also been encouraged to blame anyone who's unable to afford to live without state aid for all the country's problems, except the pensioners, of course. But they'll be next. Milo's in Penzance. Milo, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I think for me, and I think that one of the issues starts with the secondary school education system, going back to the university side of things.
Yeah.
I think that when you're going through secondary school, if you're not picked out fairly quickly as someone that's going to get into A levels and move into university, I feel that you're somewhat pushed aside and put forward for, well, not put forward for anything. You're just left and put in the lower steps and taught by lesser teachers.
And you're just treading water until it's time to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've wanted to call about this before. There's been situations that I experienced personally. I'm not academic particularly, and I sort of struggled at school. And you get the PE teachers teaching you maths, and the best maths teachers teaching the top sets, and that always really confused me. And I think so. If you leave school without you're not due to go to university, you are very much left. Now, my situation moving on to the second part has been slightly different. I've from the moment I left school, I actually became a tree surgeon, which was a very honourable trade. It was a good trade, and it taught me work ethic.
Yes.
It was something that I thought, well, I'm never going to be able to do anything academic, clearly, because that's what education has told me. I'm not worth that, so I'm going to go. Not that there's anything wrong with doing tree work, but I've gone from there to working my way up to being in sales and pharmaceutical sales.
I thought all tree surgeons work their way up.
Very good.
Thank you very much. Yeah, well, I think you're right. I think there is a danger of us focusing on people who are university bound or university relevant, and again, we forget about the people who perhaps have been spat out a little earlier in the conversation. And I'm glad you've reminded us of that. But I make no apology for focusing upon the people who were protesting yesterday about what they were specifically protesting about. Milo, I wish you well. The time is approaching 12 noon.
I've been